Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Steffen. I work for Palen Music Center, and on behalf of Kent Lineberry and myself, I want to welcome you guys to the bass clinic this morning that we're having. This is Erick Theno, Director of Orchestras at Oak Park High School, also a bassist extraordinaire. So he's going to walk us through the mythical world of bass and what we need to know about it. The headache that is the bass.
I've heard more than not that most orchestra directors their biggest hole in their teaching is the bass section. So the handout I gave you, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the beginning of teaching bass and just going straight through all of this. And some of it I'm sure you'll know, some of it you may not know. A lot of it will be my perspective.
All right, now we're good. Start over.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, yeah, bass is usually where a lot of teachers have mentioned that's kind of where their hole in their teaching is. And so like I said, the handout that I have here is detailed enough so that way when you do leave here, if you do forget things or whatever, you do have access to that with hopefully a lot of good information, I hope. And like I said, I'm starting from the beginning, just kind of give you my perspective on everything straight through. And again, some of the stuff I'm sure you'll know or you're doing, other stuff you'll learn a few things. I call this session my double basics, just because my professor, Sue Stubbs, my bass teacher in college, she did a clinic like this at NMEA one year when I was in college, and that's what she called it. It's kind of an homage to her. So anyway, your first bullet, double bass is the most important instrument, hands down. It is. And there are some reasons why. First of all, harmonic stability, of course. They always give the bass the root of every chord most of the time. Even if we're just doing puddles, it's there. Everybody seems to tune to us is what we keep hearing. Rhythmic stability too. So any jazz lick, any funky tunes, we're playing some kind of ostinato or some kind of funky little rhythmic figure that if we botch it, the entire orchestra just goes downhill pretty quick. I love it. What drew me to the bass was its versatility. Just so many different styles I can play with. I can play with it between classical, jazz, bluegrass, rockabilly. It was a really easy transition to the bass guitar, which opened up the world to some different rock, metal, that kind of stuff too. So love it for that for sure. I mean, our job as bass players is to make every other instrument look good. That's what we do. I firmly believe that if I ever leave a gig and they remember the bass player, I've done something terribly wrong. They should not remember me. They should just think it was a great performance, and that's how that works. So. And then obviously the bass just looks good on its own. I mean, it looks really cool. You ask, whenever we do our recruitment, and of course the bass is held up, the kid, wow, yeah, because it looks cool on its own. It's huge, it's massive. I always use the analogy, would you rather have a big bowl of ice cream or a small bowl of ice cream? A big chocolate bar or a small chocolate bar? And that usually, gets there thinking about, well, bigger in this case doesn't mean bad. So keep that in mind. My frustration is I always hear teachers, and again, this is a big generalization. I'm not saying that you guys do, but this is what I've heard a lot of times. Is there's a student that joins orchestra the second year, and they're like, well, we'll just give them the bass, which is frustrating because of all those reasons why bass is important. You're going to have a kid who has been playing for very long, and you're giving him, in my opinion, one of the most important instruments in the orchestra. So it does make things rather difficult. So just be careful when you do that. Stop making your second bass players who join orchestra, second year bass players, second year joins play bass. Give them a violin because there's so many to cover them, or make them join choir, is my opinion. So I'm only half joking when I say that. All right, so sizing. And that's always, these things, as you can see, are massive, but they do come in a myriad of sizes, all the way down to like 8th size basses. Those are adorable. You might as well give them a cello. But your half sizes, your quarter sizes, and generally speaking, we start in 5th grade in North Kansas City. Liberty does as well. And generally, most of those students end up with a quarter size bass. Most of them, unless they're just really, really tall kids, then you get your half sizes. Very rarely will you ever see a kid of that age get a 3/4. Very, unless they're just massive. And then on occasion you will have, in high school, you will have your full size bass, but generally speaking, your 3/4 is going to be your max size. I would not invest any money in your program and buy a full size bass. It's just not that common. And so just an example, Mike, can I borrow you for a second? Would you grab the 3/4 bass? I want to show them the comparison. So I actually play on a full-size bass. And so to kind of show you a little bit of a comparison on size, the 3/4 is going to be your standard full size, and this is going to be your full size. I'm going to take a picture for our friends online, and you can see there is a difference in height, a difference in width. But like I said, 3/4 should be more than enough for most, if not all, of your students. I happen to have a student at Oak Park who is 6'8", and I am debating on bringing a full size in just for him. But then after he leaves, I'm starting with a full size bass that no one's going to use. So it kind of depends on what kind of money you're wanting to spend. But I wouldn't worry. I would stick with 3/4 and encourage students, like I'm pretty sure I can, to rent their own full size bass. Just because the money is not worth it in the end. I hate to say it like that because all of our students are important, but my point being, basically, put it there. When you're sizing an instrument, look at the kid, look at the instrument next to him if you can. If it looks massive, then it's too big. If it looks like a toy, a small toy, then it's too small. Use your best judgment. Visually, there's no like, if they're so tall, they get a full size. If they're so short, they get a quarter size. To me, it's just a matter of seeing them next to the instrument and making my judgment. Usually err on the side of, I would go a little bit smaller if you're not too sure, just because again, the physicality of the instrument will hopefully make them better or make them feel good about it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so French bow versus German bow. So another question I get a lot is, when do I choose French versus when do I choose German with students? And that was cool. Yeah, that's it. When you hear those sounds, you should give them German. So French and German, generally speaking, I encourage everyone to start with French. It's so much easier to teach your entire group the same bow hold than try to teach the violin, viola, cello. Well, violin, viola, one bow hold, the cello, a slightly different bow hold, and then a bass, a completely different bow hold. So I always say start with French. The only time I really switch students to German is if their French bow is extremely tight and tense and just obnoxious. What I love about the French bow, again, besides the fact that it's easier to teach everyone all at one time, but it's also, if they hold the bow right, they're able to use the weight of their hand, and their first finger is what applies weight to the string, and they're able to lean on it a little bit. And so it does allow them to really grip the strings fairly easily. The perks of a German bow is the way that it's held. Your thumb is actually what applies the weight to the string. Your strongest digit, your thumb is the strongest part of your hand, and so you're now using the strongest part of your hand to apply weight. So you can really get strong about it and be super aggressive about it. If done correctly, and the same thing with the French bow, is I can just use my thumb. I'm not gripping the bow at all. I'm just letting my thumb do all the work. And it makes it real simple and really straightforward. And so if I see a student whose French bow is just super tense, super tight, their thumb is straight, their hands are curled the wrong direction, and it's usually not till middle school to early high school that I'll make that consideration and that change. So real quick, for those, and I'll pass this around too, be nice to my bow. This is obviously my expensive bow. German bow is pretty straightforward. You have them hold their hand like they're going to shake your hand, and then you set the frog in the webbing of their thumb. Now with my bow, you look, they actually octagoned, or that's a hexagon actually, the ferrule, the part right above where the thumb goes, so that way it has a nice flat surface to get purchase on. Then your second and middle finger just sit on the stick, just like, again, the same spot that has the hexagon on it. Your third finger does absolutely nothing. It really doesn't do a darn thing. Students will do this with it. I say avoid that, keep it out. I usually just attach it to my middle finger, and then your pinky sits right on, I can never remember what this piece of the bow is called. Little piece of metal there. And then there you go. It's almost like you're cupping a tennis ball. And then boom. So if you want to experiment with that a little bit, the thing is just a matter of, and I'm going to walk off camera. Just getting that right in there. And that's your main support system. And then your thumb is what really applies apply as the weight. And then your pinkies just support. And you go through the pattern. If you want to know that a little bit, ask questions if you need to, if it doesn't make sense. By all means, let me know. Do you have another drum bow, or is that the only one?
I would just choose one here.
Oh, here you go. Yeah, like I said, if you want to grab a bass, at any point, pick the bass up and make some noise on it. That's a little bit. You want to experiment with the drum bow for just a second or two, or a minute or two, whatever, as long as do so. It is a different monster, but it does. I have found that, again, if a student's French bow is really, really tight and stiff, if you do a French bow, it's amazing how loose their hand becomes. It really relaxes them a lot, and they tend to just chill out just a little bit.
Say that again, if the
French bow is super tight, right? Thumb is straight,
super tight,
and
and the
they're
German will make them relax.
a lot of times, yeah, is what I have found. Not always. Like I said, I never start someone on German. I always start on French first. You know, you talk to a professional, and they might decide that there is a difference in sound that one or the other makes. But I mean, at this level, no, there's not. So, you know, like I said, feel free to grab a bass if you want to experiment with one or the other and kind of feel. It is nice. There's something really gratifying about being able to use your thumb to apply bow weight. It really, really is. That's kind of like I really like about doing that. Steve Stubbs, when I was in college, my freshman and sophomore year, kept trying to push me to play German. Play German, no, you want to play German, no, you should do German. And I kept telling her, no, I play French, I play French. And then I made a deal with her that if I passed my juries into my second level of bass lessons, I would switch over to German, and I did, and I loved it, and I hated her for it. Like, you know, when your mom's right, you don't want to admit it, kind of thing. So yeah, she was right. I solely use German unless I have to now. But like I said, I would never start someone on French for sure. So anyway, that's kind of the two things. Now, last thing about the bow is, so violin, viola, and cello use a lot of wrist and elbow is the joints that they use to play, whether they're playing the cello here, playing the violin here. Not much in the shoulders involved. If you use a shoulder, then of course you're pulling the bow back, forward, and you're making it kind of a wobbly, right? Well, with bass, we actually use wrist and we use shoulder. We do not use much in the way of elbow. So one of the best analogies I use for my beginning students is to think of your arm as a pendulum. And that's the motion, think of a clock or whatever, and that's what they have to do. The bow gets crooked fast the second their elbow bends. So as an example of that, it's a French bow this time. Against my better judgment. You know, the second my elbow bends, they do a pull up. I know cello's bad about that too. They bend that elbow too much and they pull up real hard. And so if I can convince them to not bend their elbow, keep their elbow straight and just let the wrist and the shoulder do the work. And they're the pendulum. I'm barely pressing down, which is why I'm getting kind of that airy sound. But again, there's really no elbow in that. So encourage your bass players, don't let them bend their elbow. Keep it straight, let their wrist flex, let their shoulder do the work. And again, the best analogy is a pendulum. So if you guys want to, just as a quick little, you know, if you want to grab your bass real quick, just pick it up real fast and just play with that for a minute. Think about your arm being straight. Let your wrist do the motion. You can use the German bow if you want. You can use the French bow if you want. And that works for both French and German, regardless. Your elbows doing the flex, or your wrist and your shoulder. I don't want you to feel that just real quick. Sherry, just say you have one more German bow.
That one right, that one's the other one.
I'm about to take my German bow back and give.
Oh,
You get the sucker read out here at some point in my life. Yeah, I just want to give you a minute to experiment with that just for a second or two, get a feel for that, and think about. Now we're going to think about that pendulum idea. So the, you know, while you're doing it, I think that'll help you kind of get an idea. I'll discuss infant height here in a second, so don't worry too much about that at the moment, unless you're just dying to. But
There is rosin on the piano.
You just make some noise on your own for a second. I'm not gonna grade you. Unless you're Parker. And he automatically fails. I don't trust cello players.
Oh, they're opposite.
When you're on the streets on your boat, you find yourself.
You have to, yeah. That's a good catch. Thank you for that too. There's a slight angle you have to take.
Is there always an angle? I mean, the base doesn't stand straight up.
That's my next
Okay.
topic for sure. No, you're thinking ahead, and I appreciate that. Again, I'm flying through my just kind of feel, like I said, just feel that. And then every so often bend your elbow and just see what happens.
So, since I'm accustomed to something similar to that, is the front is like this. So it's kind of bent to the side. Whereas like when I teach violin, it's bent this way.
Oh, it's almost the same.
That's what I was trying to answer. It's the kind that I have here. So, it's this. It's terrible.
My second. I try to avoid letting it go through. Just like limits. All right, so enough of that. I know, like every student ever, they're like, "Ooh, a big instrument. Let me make some random noise on it." So, all right. So while you guys have those up, we're gonna go ahead and move on into posture position, how to size up the bass in regards to like the infant heights, etc. Generally speaking, again, these are general rules and guidelines. But what I always do is I want the nut to be forehead level. I want the nut to be right in the middle of their forehead. So go ahead and adjust your basses to match that height so that the nut is forehead height. Give or take, of course.
Now when it's leaning, when it's straight ahead.
Like right here. Is about where I want it to be. Because generally you want the left hand. So pretend that this bass is taped, like Sherry's has hers taped. You basically want your first position hand to be at jaw level. So that way it's easy to look. Eye level, give or take. It's not all the way down here or all the way up here. I've had to make some adjustments on those students. I had one 8th grader, made me laugh. I noticed that he came in from another district, different state actually, and his bass was way up here. Like no joke, like it was an exaggeration. And I mentioned, I'm like, man, that's gonna make your wrist hurt, man, if you keep doing like that. Oh, it does. Keep being right all the time. Anyway, so, you know, so that's one of the reasons why you want to keep it there. Now, so the C-bout right here, the best example. So you want your bass to be vertical, and the C-bout here on the edge, there is a little indentation where your thigh meets your hip. And that's where you want it to go into. So this little edge right here is going to hit the ridge right in that inner thigh area there. It just sets. This is why I believe that God's a bass player, because he actually designed us with a place to put our bass. Whereas violins need a shoulder rest, a shin rest, viols do too. So, you know, just saying. Anyway, and then cello's got to have a sit. So, but And so, yeah, you literally just have them step into their bass, have it facing out, and then literally that little ridge, just angle it so that ridge is facing right towards their leg, and it just sits right in there. And that's the best way to do it. And it should. One of my personal annoyances is when a bass player tries to play like this. I do not like a lean bass. I like the bass to be fairly straight up and down with a slight lean towards me, just so that I know it's secure. There is a style of bass. I'm trying to remember who the bass teacher in the area that kind of pushes it, in which they drill out the bottom part here, and they put an end pin at like almost a 45-degree angle, so the the bass is almost like this, which turns it into more of a cello, and I am not a fan of that. It's good if you are a solo player and you're constantly doing kind of thumb position thing. That does allow a little bit more access to it, but overall, I mean, for what we do, it's a waste. But yeah, so definitely avoid your students from trying to do this crap, especially if they're letting their lean. Or what they'll do is they'll extend their input out further so they can sit like this. And now all my mechanics are off. It looks terrible. Number 2, always start your bass players standing. Do not let them use a stool in the beginning. They can sit in their core classes. They'll stand in orchestra. I have known several bass players that start off on a stool and they cannot play standing up. They can't. They're like, I got on a stool. Just stand up. We can't do it. So, but I've known several bass players who start standing who have no problem sitting on a stool. The only difference is they have to lower their input a little bit. It's fine. So did everyone feel that ridge I'm talking about here? That's what's great about the C-bow. Like I said, there's just that little angle there. And it's right there. It's always weird talking to your 5th graders or younger students about your inner thigh. Always a good conversation when I have in school, which is why I always say there's a little ridge where the thigh meets the hip is always what I say. And just find that right there. It's just right next to your pocket. Boom. And it just, you know, you can feel when it just slides in there. So anyway, just keep that in mind. Choose your words carefully. It can come off in a weird way if you're not too careful. So again, you're thinking now. So here is with if you have your tapes, you know, a lot of you do have tapes. Again, think about your hand shape and your hand position. Think about my left arm. I want my elbow up. I want it next to my face. This will happen a lot. With that elbow resting against it, can get lazy. And of course, as you can see, that just junks or that separates the hand from the forearm. Here's a great example that I love to do with students, and this works for violin and violin as well, is if I have them hold their left hand up and I have them grab their forearm. And if they jiggle their fingers, what do you feel? You feel all the tendons that control your hand. Then I have them do this and then jiggle. Is that harder, easier, or harder? Well, it's obviously harder, and it's obviously harder. Whereas it's straight, it's super easy, but more in motion. Same thing here with this. I gotta have a straight line here. So that way my hand can access all of the tendons and stuff that it needs to operate in my forearm. So most of the muscles are there. There's some muscles on your hand, but so keep that in mind.
Do you sometimes see that arm drops to support the base because they don't have a good hold here?
The two or they're being.
They're trying to balance it.
Usually it's just laziness more than anything else. They get tired because, and here's what a bass player will do.
Well, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying there could be reasons why they're doing it that are more than just the arm.
Well, here's the next thing too. It also applies. Cellists do this almost as bad as bass players do, and violin and viols to a lesser extent. And that is the shoulder shrug. They'll come up and they'll shrug the shoulder. And so think about your structure of your muscles. If your shoulder is tired, that's okay. If your trap muscles are tired, that's not okay. The trap muscle is what controls the shoulder going up and down. So if the trap muscle is tired, then that means that they're shrugging. If their shoulder is tired, that means they're doing it right. And so in the initial stages, all instruments are going to have in their left hand, they're going to have some tiredness in the shoulder until the muscle develops. Their trap muscle right next to their neck should not be tired because that means they're doing this. And even just a little bit of a shrug will cause problems, will cause that muscle to be tired. So sometimes you have to just take a big deep breath and just drop your shoulders down and let all of that be a mechanical sound. I try to convince students that we are trying to do the most unnatural thing as naturally as possible. I mean, how often do we do these motions in class or in a normal situation? We don't. And so we're trying to keep it as structurally sound as possible to make them do that. Anyway, all right, so left hand. Left hand, and this works for cello too, is I always say, pretend like you're holding a cup of water. A frosty cold beer. No, don't tell them that. That's the hand position. Bloop. As if they're holding a cup of water. That is literally the hand position. The number one thing that students do is they give you the thumbs up. And it's always like, when was the last time you grabbed something like this? So effective. It's not how our hands are designed. Your opposable thumb. Your thumb is designed to oppose your other fingers. If your thumb is up, it's not opposing anything. It's just a waste of space. So you have to be really, really, really mean about getting that thumb in the right spot, because this is not going to promote good position. Try that real fast, and then see how far your pinky can stretch with your thumb up in the air, vertically. Give them thumbs up. Then put your hand like you're holding a cup, and then see how far your pinky can stretch. It really is night and day on what is available to your hand. Again, it's hand structure. Your hand is designed to be like this, and it'll be really wide. But the second I do this, my pinky drops back, ends up just being not a good way to do it. So you have to be critical about that, and you can't let them. The number two thing, I don't know if I can show this very easily, is they let things collapse in. And that you have to have that gap there. And again, I think most other string instruments are the same way. You can't just be clamping down real hard. Oh, they also do that too. Forget about that one. The thumb on like the violin thumb. And they try to do like this. Again, same thing. When was the last time you grabbed something like that? That's how a newborn grabs a Cheeto. Forget about that. It's weird. Anyway, point being, your thumb has to be there to oppose your fingers. That's where your thumb has to be. It's going to save a whole lot of headache and a whole lot of problems if you encourage that. So the bowl of the handout, do you have a question?
I just had a question, like, what are some string techniques you use for those kids who collapse tips instead of being on the tips?
I do have that later in the
Okay,
presentation.
sorry.
Would you just wait? Because of the physicality of the bass is the most physically demanding of all of the instruments. If you are not taking special care to make sure they have good position, good posture with everything, then they do run the risk of over time damaging their hand, damaging their form, damaging something. Bass players are more susceptible to tendonitis and carpal tunnel than the other instruments due to just the physical nature of it. And so I can vouch for that. My pinky on my left hand has been damaged. If I use it for too much, it hurts and it's no longer as effective, because for the longest time, I would let the center joint collapse in. And so it would do that. I don't know if you can see that too well, but yeah, it's that first joint flexes while the other one just stays straight. And over time, it put pressure in the wrong direction on that pinky. And so now I have to deal with that. So I do a lot more shifting because of that. It's kind of a pain in the neck, but it is what it is. So taping. And again, I do have finger exercises for that as well. And actually, we can probably go ahead and skip this if you want to. One of the things for hand strengthening, I have bass players do initially, and they think I'm stupid and they think it's crazy. But if you just have them on all four strings, just simply have good posture and then just click. And then the second finger, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and just get them used to that idea without a bow, without any plucking. Because the first thing when a bass player does is when they pluck a string with their pinky, they get that buzz they don't like. And then they begin to do awkward positional things to try to eliminate that buzz. Including, okay, it's gone now, I'm good now. Have a good sound, which is not right. So you can have them just kind of click each string for a little bit. You know, maybe you're working with the violins and your bass players click and you watch them do it, and you know, they'll start messing around over time. But another thing that I like to, that I've purchased, and it's on your sheet at the end there, are grip strengthening. These are called Grip Masters Pro Hands. They obviously each finger has its own spring, and there are several levels of tension. This is a medium tension. This is an extra heavy tension. Extra heavy has 11 pounds of squeeze per spring, whereas medium is only 7. They have extra light, which is 3, I believe. So I think it goes odd numbers: 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. And I just found it came out with extra heavy. That's 13. I'm gonna go buy, which I certainly enjoy. But you know, you like the extra light, and you can have them do that kind of thing, and just get used to that kind of feel, that kind of push, making sure that they really focus on that pinky, because your pinky is obviously the weakest of all of your fingers. And it does work out, and it does require that they have a good position, a good posture. And I have the extra heavy because it's just fun to squeeze. I keep these in my car and have fun with them. So if you want to mess with those for a second, kind of kill it. Again, they do have, that's medium and extra heavy. They do have extra light, which is significantly easier to press, especially for your beginning students. I wouldn't go with extra heavy. I think if you're gonna do a fingertips, the extra heavy is just to test your grip strength. Ever since playing
I
bass,
used to pass the test.
I have a weird fascination with grip strength. So I have a ton of different grip strength exercises or little tools, and those are the ones I like to use for.
You use those in class.
I have, yeah. No, I only have like 1, 2 bass players. So it's like you're acting out, I'll toss them and say, "Here, do this and shut up." And they'll sit there and
It's like poppets for bass players.
And so they have their pros and cons, of course. They'll mess around with the circuits to the crap over time, but it does help with the finger strength. Because like I said, usually when the grip is weak, it's usually when things start causing issues. The pinky, we know, is the weakest of all of our fingers, and that's going to be where their intonation discrepancies are the greatest. And so one of the examples I would like to show is, Sherry, would you play an F sharp on your D string here, please? Let's see if I can put something like this. That slight change in pitch, that means that the pinky is weak and it's not pressing hard enough. Now be careful, because there will be students that'll just slide their hand up and be a little past the tape to counteract that. Instead of just developing the hand strength, they will slide up and do that. And so you have to take special care with their pinky, or you'll do what I did in the damage in the joint, because you just weren't doing it right. And so the best way to show them that their pinky is weak is just to literally take your thumb and just, as they're playing an F sharp, a C sharp, a B, or whatever, squeeze their hand, put your pinky down, and you'll hear, and I'm like, oh, no, no. So it does. Again, hand strength is the #1 concern for most. Hand structure is #1. Hand tool hand strength. #2 hand strength. That was a weird sentence. Anyway, sorry. So to answer your question, they also do make foam balls that have different strength to them as well. You can buy those and have them squeeze those suckers. The problem with foam balls is they kind of want to throw them, and then I want to throw them, and then it just being a downhill spiral from there. So they are pretty handy. Again, Amazon has those for sale. They're not super cheap, but I've had those for years. They do last a long time. But yeah, they also have putty you can get too. Again, the putty has different viscosities that can also help with hand strength as well. So there's several different tools you can use. I have all these at home. So if you ever want to see them or want to borrow them, just let me know. I'll give you 1 or 2. Again, I have a weird fixation with grip strength. I do have muscles on my hand though, which is kind of cool. And I can crush a man's skull. So moving on.
Children know.
Oh,
It's part of the syllabus.
I threaten them every day with it. I'm trying to think. Any questions about position, posture, hand strength, grip, anything like that? I cannot stress enough how important it is to get that structure to be accurate. And you're going to have to be a jerk about it. And I'm sure you all are pretty mean about with all the other instruments. Why shouldn't you include the bass in that as well? Violin, hand posture, cello, hand posture, same idea. Viola, of course, even though we always forget them for good reason. So, I love my viola players. So, all right, so tapes. I've seen people do a different myriad of taping. Standard, my tapes are simple. first position, third position. 1, 4, 1, 4. Some people will put a second tape on C sharp and not do the C tape. They'll just do a second and a 4 up here in third position. I disagree with that. I'd rather establish the position and then just tell them what finger to use versus telling them exactly where the finger goes, if that makes sense. I strongly encourage that you definitely teach bass players position numbers. First position, second position, second and a half position, third position, fourth position, thumb, etc. It is kind of tedious and kind of annoying, but when you're in a your full group, you know, say 50 kids, you have 3 bass players in the back, and you gotta say, hey, bass players, go to third position, use first finger on the D string, your other D string, that one. You know, then it does save some time versus having to get off the podium, walk all the way around, and then show them you got to be here and here. Whereas if they know where third position's at, you can give them a lot of information and they can figure it out pretty quick. So that's why I always say I have first position and I have third position, and every other position can be learned based off of that. Like second position is where they put second finger on their fourth finger tape. And now we're in second position. And they have B flat, B, C. Second and a half positions, we put first finger on the B, which the tape's already there. And then you have B, C, B, C, C sharp. And then third position, of course, B, C, C sharp, B. Sorry, point being, as long as they have their position, their structure, then when they start shifting, it'll be easier for you to explain to them. And so at the beginning, make sure they know what first position is and what third position is. Because also to do a G major scale, they have to have that first initial shift. Here's where I lie to my bass players. I do not tell them about the G string. I make them shift on the D string initially. So when we're playing with the full group and they got to go D, E, F sharp, G, A. The bass shifts the most of any instrument. So if you get them shifting as soon as possible, it's not going to be that big of a deal later. If you wait too long, then they complain and cause a problem. But no, just make them do everything on the D string initially. And then and to be even more of a jerk, I make them slide back to the B and then up to C sharp. So they have an extra shift they have to deal with. Now, what's fun is when you actually inform them of the G, A, and B, and then they realize that it could have been so much easier before. Then they tend to say a few words. Some say a few words, some, oh, cool, it's even easier. Great, I like it. But again, I always like to start with the harder stuff first. That way the easier stuff becomes easier. I can spend more time with the harder stuff and then the easier stuff will come even easier because they know the hard stuff first. So as a bass player, you know, if you have your first and third, which is why I only put, I put full tapes on first position, but then on third position, I put just a half a tape, one that spans between G and D, and that's it. Just a little sliver of a tape there. Because in the beginning, we're not worried about them being able to shift up, you know, to third on the A and E. We just want to make sure that they know the D. Does that make sense? So just for a couple of seconds, have some of that. So think about your position, your posture, your hand position. And I just want you to, on it a couple of times, just go D, E, F sharp to go to third. And then back down a few times. Think about your hand position and think about some of the pitfalls that you fall into. Because I can assure you, if you're having issues, they're having the exact same issues you're having. So go and break. I can already see several of you falling into one of the pitfalls that we see. And that is, this is no longer in your hip anymore. And what you're doing is to see your hand better, you're doing this. And that's causing your elbow to get kind of goofy. So I exaggerated the motion a little bit. It's not that bad, but don't let it turn out too much. Keep it here. Keep your towards you, because that allows your hand to get around easier. So if anything, turn your bass inward, not outward. Turn it into your body, not away from your body. Yeah, it's literally just a half step back to the B. Then up to 2, 4. Because that little 1.5 position shift there, that little beat there is actually really common, especially when you start getting to slow motion for bass. A lot of times they'll have to do something stupid like that, and it's just easier to show them down. Does that make sense? And I can say, I think about your posture. I see some against the posture, your arm being to suffer a little bit. It's really more difficult than you think it is to keep things, accurate. So again, encourage your bass players to turn in their bass, not turn out, and then tell them to stop it. Don't do either. Keep it where it's supposed to be and learn to move around your bass. You can move your bass to an extent, but they start getting to stupid crap like this, and that just baffles my mind. Yeah, it works. Crazy people. Anyway, does that make sense? Like I said, have them shift early if you can. I know some of you are dealing with bigger classes, so it can be harder to focus on the bass, but I can assure you that if you get them doing that initially, when you're like, hey, violins, just go to your A string. Sorry, basses, you got to shift. Although in the most beginning books, they do go to the A string on the bass pretty quickly. So you have your A, your D, and your A. It's not till later in the book that they actually have you start going up to that. And that's what's kind of fun to go. If they can do that, then you're going to have a really good bass player. That's a little more complicated than, kind of thing. So just, again, if you can, let's see, bass players are overlooked a lot. And if you can find ways to make their brain work, then you're going to have less of your stereotypical bass player, which is the crazy kid in the back who's just jacking around because they have nothing to do. And so I try to find dumb little exercises like that to make them do more stuff. And so that leads me to my next point, and that is literature. Oh my goodness. I firmly believe, now I've not had any composer confirm this, so these are just my suspicions, but I believe that a lot of composers, the way they write for bass is because they assume that for beginning bass, for beginning orchestra songs, because they're like very easy piece, grade 1s, grade 1.5. I believe that they assume that your bass players are first year, second year group. So maybe in 5th grade, you don't have any bass players. You're now in 6th grade and you move some cello players to bass. I believe that they assume that. So your bass players are first year on the bass while everyone else is second year on their instrument. So the bass line tends to be fairly easy or straightforward because they're assuming that their bass players aren't as experienced as all your other instruments. I firmly believe that. Again, I've talked to a couple people and they won't admit it, but I'm pretty sure that's where their brains are at. And I've asked like Doug Spada, he was in, I asked Val Mages, a few other odds and ends here and there, but that's kind of what I believe. Because I choose to believe that they're not writing the bass line last. I think it sounds so great. Oh, the bass, give them a whole note. Just what we're known for. On the sheet that I've given you, there's right there are 5 pieces that I've used that I've found that are bass features. And they're very easy to easy, 1.5s. So if you want to give your bass player something a little more fun to play, then by all means do so. You should have a copy of Can Can Bass here. That I think I sent out to everyone for reason for recruitment. But it's a fun little bass tune that's basically shipped up and all kind of cool stuff. But like I said, they're all good stuff. Bob Phillips is actually surprisingly a good component bass player, so there's some good stuff on that. What I like to do for my bass players, especially if I know that I have some good bass players, some bass players that aren't on their first year while everyone's on their second or third year, is I give them the cello part. Now, they don't have to play the cello part at the concert. They can, but they don't have to. Because a lot of times, the bass part in the early years is a simplified version of the cello part. Or there are parts in which the bass player will play the root, the cello will play the 5th, or play the 3rd, or whatever the chord, and there's just that little bit of a harmony there. But overall, nothing that in a situation you're really going to miss in the grand scheme of things. So, sometimes especially if I have a good bass player who I can tell is bored, let's say you have 4 bass players, 2 are good, 2 are not, 2 are weak. I'll give the 2 good bass players the cello part and then keep the 2 on the other part. and have them switch or have them move around. You know, hey guys, today play cello part, and then tomorrow, hey, play the bass part today. There's some really great literature out there that I feel the bass was designed to be the root, the support of the orchestra, and I get that. And a lot of composers unfortunately use that to an extent where they're playing pedal Cs, they're playing whole notes, half notes, they're resting for 16 measures and then playing 3 notes, then resting for 20 measures and then playing 6 notes, and then they're resting for, you know, it is frustrating as a bass player because I did not join orchestra to not play. And as a bass player, if you're not careful with your literature choices, your bass players will do more not playing than they will be playing. There's some fantastic literature out there that does have the bass players resting a lot. I'm not saying you can't play those. I'm just saying, please don't make your entire concert choice those songs. You know, the Brook Green Suite, fantastic piece. But the first movement, is pretty much, I think the cello player does the exact same thing. It's literally just a descending C major scale. And if your bass players aren't masters of C major scale, then it's something very wrong. But when you have something like that, I like to challenge the bass players. Say, bass players, no G strings. You cannot use the G string when you play it this time. Figure it out. And you give them a minute, you see the cogs begin to work. You know, and then it forces them to use alternate positions, alternate fingerings, and then they get to use the geography. They get to learn the geography of their bass. Because there is more room for error on this instrument than there is for any other instrument. You know, our 1 to 4 is a violin's 1 to 3rd position, it feels like. And so, you know, you got to give them things to occupy their brain to make them think about their instruments, not just think that they're just extra, they're just background stuff. Oh yeah, I don't need practice, stuff's easy. But there is something to be said about counting rests. You can ask any orchestra student, I guarantee you they'd much rather be playing consistently than having to play at odd times within a passage. Going 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 4 and 2. You know, that is really difficult to do versus just playing straight 8th notes. Bass players have that a lot, where they have to make sure they are accurate counters, which is why you got to be careful with who you put on bass, because if they can't count to 4, then you're in a lot of trouble. If they can't do the good old fashioned, then they got to be able to count in order to play, because they have so much rest to count, especially if you have, I mean, counting 4 measures of rest is not really easy if you think about it. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. And then they wait for your cue, and of course you're trying to figure out what the violins are doing wrong, and then you're like, you know, and of course you miss your cue. You miss the cue because you're trying to figure out why the hell they're playing. They're not playing a high 3 when you said high 3 1,000 times. You know, it's tricky. So, you know, you got to make sure they understand the importance of counting, because if they come in wrong, I'm sure you've all experienced it with your bass players. They come in wrong, it makes the entire orchestra sound wrong. I'm not saying that the violins don't play their part right, or violas or cellos, it doesn't make the orchestra sound wrong either. But you know, just playing one single E on beat 4 can really derail an entire measure. Not playing on beat 1 can make the timing of that particular section sound weird on a good day. And so you got to be extremely careful with ignoring your basses for too long, because then they'll stop caring. So again, I said the cello part's a great thing to do. I've done hybrids where I've taken some of the cello chunks where the basses are resting, and I've just taken the bass cello part, cut out pieces, put on a piece of paper, glued it, copied it, said, here you go, play this now. And so it takes me no more than you know, 10, 15 minutes depending on what I'm doing to do it, or how long the piece is at. But you know, and they like it. They have fun with it. I did it with the 8th graders this year because they had some stupid boring pieces. And so I'm gonna just give them the cello parts. All right, play 43 to 53 on the cello part. The rest is on your bass part. They had both pages, and man, they figured it out. And so, because like I said, that if not, then they're just sitting there playing on their phones and being bored. And then you have to, bassist, let's join us. And then you have to pick their basses up, hold their hand, and then you wait for them to find their input. You know, it's stupid. It's bad. Anyway, it's kind of frustrating, and it does, but it's good.
The best thing is when they come in on the wrong beat confidently and continue to play on the wrong beat and have no idea they're on the wrong beat.
I'm so glad
And
you
then the
guys came.
cellos are looking around going, what's going on? Because they know the basses are off.
I mean, and that's
I know that never happens. In any
none of my orchestra.
just in mine.
And so, well, that's where I threatened to buy Nerf guns. Just pop. Anyway, and the funny is, I have students that have offered to buy me Nerf guns for that reason.
Well, it's really sad when you find yourself saying, all you have to do is count to 4. How hard is that?
And so,
But
yeah,
You're right.
no,
You're distracted and.
you know, the count. You know, I've had. I mean, like I said, I was using it in college. You know, playing full symphonies, and I'm resting for 58, 60, 70 measures, and I have to count.
We went to a clinic this last year with Chris Keltz at Mo State, and he was so funny. He said, I'll tell you this conducting secret that I tell all my conducting students. Down is 1. Just get to 1. Always get to 1. And I thought, how profound is that? And we just sort of take that for granted. He said, not everybody understands that down is 1.
Always 1, forever and ever and ever. And that's, I mean, I think it's something, as she was talking, I began to do the whole bass, the typical bass thing. As she's talking. But think about it though, how often have I not played? I want to play, damn it. But it's that I'm resting. And so when you're talking, I'm going to play. I find to play, even though I'm not supposed to play this time. It's like bad attention is still attention. So, and you'd be surprised how many students have that philosophy. They want attention and they'll take bad attention because it's still attention.
Yes.
Same principle with the bass. I want to play, and if I get yelled at, I'm still going to play. So again, remember, your bass players do want to play. So if you end up pulling a piece that is is very rest heavy or very monotonous for a bass player, you may want to consider the cello part, or just make sure that you find some other pieces down the road that do have some more stuff. String basics. The cello part is basically the bass part. So, but it's harder, which is great because bass players have to do some shifting. They have to slur while shifting, which is great. And I think that's a great time that I'd give them the cello part. Unless they're really weak bass players who maybe they are on their first year, then I'll give them the bass part. Any questions about literature, anything like that? So far, makes sense. Again, I give a couple examples. If you just type in bass feature, you'd be surprised what you can find. And I love that, you know, like J.W. Pepper gives you gives you scores to look at and that kind of stuff, and you can really analyze the bass part of it. I mean, I know violas are the second most forgotten about instrument, so I always look for those. Are the first 2 things I look at is the viola and the bass part, and just kind of see are they interesting. When my viola players hate me for life, my bass players get in trouble because they're bored, and that's what I'll go for.
I like on YouTube. Toss it up, and I'll toss it up on my TV and I'll turn the score.
Oh yeah, isn't that nice? When they have them on occasion, those are pretty good stuff. So let's think, other considerations. Okay, so a couple quick little tricks. Well, first of all, C extension, don't worry about it. They are expensive, and unless you're just overflowing with funds and you have a few $1,000s to blow, you don't need them. I bought mine because I got a deal when I bought the bass. They said that for an extra like $1,200, they throw on the C extension, which is usually 25, 26. And that was 20 years ago. So give or take. So obviously they're more expensive now because of the cost of materials. This particular C extension is a slide C extension. So, you know, I can maneuver anywhere I want between an E and a C. What I like about the slide extension is it allows me to tune. You know as well as I do, the second you start playing your strings, they start going out of tune. And the orchestra as a whole is no longer perfectly in tune. And so, you know, I know that about there's a D. But if I hear it kind of funky, I can take a second and just do a quick little micro adjustment and get it where I need it to be. You know, there's about an E flat, there's about a C sharp, and there's my C. Again, I have guesstimations where it's going to be at. I've really only started using it really heavily in college, especially with like Beethoven. A lot of times I think Beethoven just gives the bass player the cello part, which I'm not upset about. But when it goes down to a low C, you're sliding back and then you're having to play up there, which is kind of weird. The other option is they make a switch C extension where there'll be 4 switches. I'm sure you've seen those. And those are kind of neat. What I love about those is they're quick. You flick the switch and you're down to the E flat. You flick the switches, you're down to a D. But you can't tune them very easily. It does take some modifications. But like I said, in the high school level, I mean, unless Palen's like, here, I'll give them to you for free, I wouldn't waste your money on it.
That was the joke of your speech today.
They're in the market to just give stuff away. That's how businesses work. But anyway, so I wouldn't worry. I mean, that's kind of a quick and dirty on C extensions, but I wouldn't worry about them. They're worth it for as a bass player, going to college and playing bass a lot, doing solos, that kind of stuff. It was worth it for that. But overall, if I'm just doing ensemble work, especially at a high school level, not so much worth it. All right, so a couple of things. Your bass players are going to do foolish things like, hey, come here. And they're going to carry it awkwardly and weird. So if you don't know this little trick, I'm going to show you 2 tricks. One is how to carry the bass. First of all, always make sure your input is in, but turn it sideways with the bridge facing to your body. Grab the C bout and lift. Please tell all of your bass players to carry it like this. I now have a free hand for the door. I'm not going to scrape anything. Make sure it's on their hip. And now I can go anywhere I want. My arm is extended and locked out, so it's not going to put a lot of extra strain on my bicep. I'm not going to get as tired as easy. Whereas if I carry it like this, it's all in my arms now, and my arms will start screaming. They do that awkward waddle.
And you're too wide.
To the doorway. And so again, I cannot show that to them as soon as possible because they'll figure out what works for them, what they like better, and then they'll tell you that you're done. They won't say it to your face like literally those words, they might, but a lot of times like, oh, this is so much easier, but I like my way better. But this is easier, but I like my. I've been playing bass for a long time, trust me. So yeah, just as soon as you can, show that to them, and against the body, grab, and then have this little section right here on your hip. And like I said, to have that free hand is money. Hold the bow. Anyway, and I do love the quivers, but it'll spoil your basses. Quivers are amazing. I love them dearly, but like I said, they spoil your basses. So if you want to spoil your basses, buy them a quiver. They're really inexpensive too for what they are. And I mean, I've used the quiver for me is one of those things where it's like, where have you been all my life? Because basses go from pluck to bowing a lot. It's easy to pluck, and then as a German player, I just turn my hand over and I can go real fast versus the clang, or put on the stand. And then of course, now they're late because they couldn't get a hold of it. So if you want to spoil your bass players, get a quiver. I love them. And then the number 2 little trick is putting the case on. Every beginning bass player will lay their bass down and they'll bring the case over and then they'll try to like set their bass in. No, have them keep their bass standing. Again, and pin in. So what I always do is I just come over, reach over, very politely, put it down. And then if they take their hand, like they're holding a cup of water, go figure, right? And put it top of that case there. They can use their elbow inside. See how it opens it up? And sometimes I'll use my foot and just kick it open. And then it's all done. I mean, this is one of the easiest ways to put a bass on. I put a case on it. And it goes in reverse too. Open it up. Up here, slide it off. Sometimes it puts. That right there is money. That should be worth the entire clinic right there. It's just open it up.
Where's your registration fee?
Like I said, you just use your hips or whatever you got to do to get that opened up. Like I said, just pick it up and just set it on top. And then once it's there, you can then finish adjusting it. Like putting clothes on a kid. And then it's everything good to go. Now, do you have any bass cases? You want to try them? I'd grab one or two and give that a try. That's assuming that the bass case does open from the side. There are some that open in the center, which are dumb.
I don't have any.
Thank God. If you have a bass case that does one of those center zips, throw it away. Throw it away. It is junk.
Stupidest thing ever.
There are some things that you question why people would engineer it that way. That's one of them. Absolutely. I don't get it.
And speaking of something else with cases on that case, the other base case, there's kind of like a strap around here. Why, should we encourage kids to strap it, or?
What that strap does is it prevents the case from shifting up and down, which then of course you can rub a little bit on your base.
Okay, I've only seen it get tied and like stuck there.
I use mine all the time, like as an example. This, it's loose here, so there's lay in that. And so if I just do a quick, and by quick, I mean 5 minutes later.
Anybody else want to dress your unruly toddler?
You need to try, I'm telling you, you need to try that. Just give it a good tug. Now that play's kind of gone, so now it's just more secure in the case. And I will say the base case, if you buy a base case, the more straps, the better. Oh, and the hard cases are a waste of money. They're massive, they're huge, and you can't put them on a plane. They will not take them.
All right, y'all.
Anyway, like those cases are going to get a try. I'm telling you, do that case trick real quick. I'm telling you, it's worth its weight in gold, especially when you watch a kid. Like if your last class is that class and you want to go home, you have that one kid who just sits there and they take 10 minutes trying to fill the damn base case. You're like, just do. Oh, and one thing about cases is make sure that they don't zip their cases past the infant. They'll do that so fast. Like this zipper will go all the way over here, or this will come all the way over here, and then eventually it pokes a hole within the first week, if you're lucky, if it lasts that long. And then that zipper stops working kind of goofy. So yeah, just make sure the infant's sticking out. Anyway, that's all I got. That's my time.
Thanks, Nito.
Hopefully that. There's a lot of stuff on that, so on the handout. So.
Thanks for joining us on Zoom, folks.
Just leave your base beside your chair. You can put the end pen in, but just leave it out.